Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's Economy and Place Scrutiny Committee, held on Thursday, the 1st of September at 7 p.m. I'd like to remind all of those present that this is currently going out live on YouTube and is being recorded for publication at a later date. We'll now start working our way through the agenda. And the first item is apologies for absence. So I've received apologies from Councillor Betley Smith, who is being substituted by Councillor Holland, and Councillor Beeston, who is being substituted by Councillor Fox-Hewitt. There is also Officer Simon McKenney has offered his apologies and is being substituted by Mr. Hamilton. Are there any other apologies? No, thank you. Anybody like to declare any declarations of interest for items on the agenda this evening, please? None noted. So we move on to minutes of the previous meeting, which are on pages 3 to 10 of your pack. Does anybody want to make any comments on, or can we take them as read? Councillor Panther.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On the last page, the leader of the council mentioned there can be 2 further consultations regarding the joint local plan, one relating to sites and the other with another prior. I'm just wondering if we know when these are likely to happen and where.
I'd look to our cabinet member for that.
Sorry, Chair, I don't have that information. I'll speak to you after the meeting. Okay.
If you can pick up, Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, in terms of the first of those, the timetable for that is to do that this calendar year. The second one, not quite so sure on to what the detail of that was.
Sites, I mean,
yeah, but there's one to be scheduled for this calendar
later this year.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So going back to the minutes, can we take them as read, please? Yep. Okay. Thank you. So we move on to item 4, which is an update from Cabinet. I've been told that there is no update for this evening's meeting, so we will move on to the next agenda item, which is item 5, and it's the first substantive item this evening, and that's an update on recycling and waste services. It's quite a while since we've had an update on this at this scrutiny committee, and this is going to be introduced by Cabinet Member Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Well, we've had our new recycling and separate food waste collection service fully operational for 2 years now. We implemented during the COVID pandemic, which was a very challenging time for the service. The rollout went very well and smoothly and was well received by our residents, and it continues to be so. Participation in the service has increased enormously, as it is a far simpler and tidier operation than the previous box collection system. Our collection tonnage for recycling is increased by around 22%, and the quality of the material collected is excellent. And this is confirmed by the positive feedback from our reprocessors, who turn our material back into products. We in Staffordshire have gone from one of the lowest performers for recycling to the second highest, with Staffordshire Moreland marginally ahead of us. And on a personal note, I'd like to say that I couldn't be more prouder of the staff for bringing about such a transformation. I'll now hand over to Andrew to give us a more detailed report on the service. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Thank you, Chair. Obviously, you've had the report. What I've done is I thought we'd take you through it with a small presentation, really, and then obviously I can answer any questions you may have at the end. So just a bit of background, really, in the first instance. So the new service, effectively, or the design of the new service was approved by Cabinet back in September 2018. And that followed a cross-party working group that had effectively worked on the design of the proposals the year before. Planned implementation date originally was set for September 2020. But then obviously the COVID pandemic hit. So we were immediately faced effectively with a 25% reduction in staff, mainly due to shielding and COVID. We had massively increased volumes of waste that were being collected, so around about 25% higher, and that was because everybody was effectively at home and creating waste and doing lots of DIY things and bits like that. So we had less staff and we were collecting far more waste. And effectively the source separate or box recycling service that we had, which was very labour intensive, became impossible to operate. So what we did was effectively decide to bring forward the implementation of the new twin stream service from September to May 2020, and the rollout began then. And it became fully operational in August 2020, so marginally just over 2 years ago. So where are we now? So thankfully, the new service settled in very quickly. We'd done an enormous amount of planning for the new service, and that came to fruition. We'd obviously increased the types and numbers of plastics that we were able to collect. So with the previous services, we were only able to collect mixed plastic bottles. With the new service, we were able to add pots, tubs and trays, or PTT as it's commonly known. And that was something that residents had been asking for a number of years. As Trevor outlined, the feedback from residents was very positive and continues to be so. And effectively, the system looks a lot tidier in terms of the street scene than the previous box service. As indicated by Councillor Johnson, the tonnage of recycling increased by 22%. And fortunately, this has been sustained, which gives further recognition that the service is well used and well liked. And then thankfully, because of that, and because of the food waste service as well, the overall volume of waste has decreased by 13.7% to below COVID pandemic levels. So, when we look at waste, we should always try and focus on waste minimisation before we do anything. So that's really good to see that it's come down by that amount. And actually, many authorities in the UK haven't seen that drop that we have. So that's, really positive. So in terms of performance then, I've just put some graphs up there just to show you generally what the situation is. And I've sort of taken it back 6 years to sort of around about 2015, 2016. And as you can see, the recycling performance on the green line basically stayed fairly steady until 2020, and then that's where we see that 22% increase. The light blue line at the top is the refuse, and again we can see that large peak during the COVID pandemic, and then thankfully it coming back down. And then the black line at the bottom is the food waste. And again, what you can see there is when the new recycling service came in, that came back up and actually started to outperform that service's tonnage, how it was previously. And the second graph effectively just concentrates on the dry recycling. So you can see this one a little bit clearer in terms of that initial uplift 2 years ago, and then the fact that the levels have been sustained thereafter. So in terms of just performance and material reprocessing, operationally the new service is far more efficient and therefore reliable. We undertake on average about 544,000 collections every month from households. So we collect from around about 57,000 households, 4 waste streams, and that's the volume that's undertaken. So it's a huge amount of collections. As I said, it's a far more reliable service, and actually the last quarter we recorded our lowest number of missed collections reported at any time, and that came out at 46.46 missed collections per 100,000 of collections made. So every 100,000 we effectively missed 46. So that gives us a 99.95 collection success rate, and obviously that's a figure that we will look to continue to improve on. As Councillor Johnson indicated, the quality of the material is excellent. I think that's, again, because residents have been used to separating material for a number of years, and that's really the key to having really good quality material. And the fact that some of it is now mixed together doesn't really matter, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But quality means far more value and basically far more ease for it to be properly recycled. Obviously, the twin stream system that we've got keeps paper and card, or fibre as we know it, as we call it technically, separate. And again, this increases the quality and value of the material for reprocessing. So where you have authorities that mix the cardboard and paper in with the other materials, that paper and cardboard becomes very, very contaminated, and effectively is unable to find any UK reprocessing market. So it tends to be exported, and we've all seen the results of that through the media and the like, in terms of how negative that can come over. So the key is to really keep, in particular, glass and fibre completely separate from one another. And as I say, the paper and card we are able to sell directly from our depot in Nutton Lane straight into a card production mill, and it's currently going to one called Kappa Smurfit in Birmingham. The dry mix material goes to a material recovery facility, or a MRF as we call it, for further separation and processing prior to going on to remanufacture. And I know a couple of new councillors have been to see that facility with myself a few weeks ago. From that facility, we receive monthly validated end destinations reports. So we are able to track materials that we collect from households right the way through to what happens to them. And again, that's really important for us to give confidence and peace of mind to residents that actually we do take responsibility as a council, and that actually we strive wherever we can to see those materials reprocessed in the UK. And again, over 95% of the materials we currently collect are indeed recycled into new products in the UK. Things like aluminium is probably the one that goes abroad at the moment, mainly into Germany, and that's because the UK no longer has any rolling mill capability for aluminium. So it has to go to Germany to be effectively melted down, rolled, and then it comes back here to be turned into cans, just the way it is. So I really now want to sort of talk to you about the sort of short and long term things that we as a council need to look at. And in terms of the long term, there's some really quite challenging and new legislation coming through. But in terms of the short term, in terms of what we're doing at the moment, we want to increase separate food waste participation. So it's going very well, but we want to increase the number of residents using it. So we are continually looking at new ways of being able to communicate with people and get them to do that. We're refreshing and enhancing the recycling provision for flats. So we want to be able to get more recycling out of flats. It's always more difficult for residents in flats to recycle because of the space that they have, and the fact that they tend, well, in the main, have to use communal bins. So that presents challenges both for us as an authority and for residents. But again, we're working hard on that, and again working hard with other stakeholders such as Aspire and Staffs Housing. And the other one is that we want to develop options for the introduction of commercial waste recycling and separate food waste for commercial properties as well. And I'll come on to the reason for that shortly as we start looking at the longer term things, but it's again really important. We've got the facilities and ability to do it. We just need to make it happen. So in terms of the long term then, you may be aware that there's a new Environment Act that has come about, and the government a couple of years ago published what we call RAWS, but it's the Resource and Waste Strategy, and it's the first waste strategy that's been produced across the UK since 2007. So it's a really important document. But just to give you some background on the Environment Act itself and how it affects my services. As I say, it's the biggest change in legislation for the waste industry and indeed for the product supply chain, and that's really important, and I'll come on to that in a minute. So anybody that's producing goods and packaging will be affected by this act. And as I say, it's the biggest change since the introduction of the Environmental Protection Act 1990. So we're looking at something over 30 years ago. It received royal assent on the 9th of November last year, and it is now called the Environment Act 2021. And it's Chapter 3, Part 3, Sections 47 to 68, which cover the issues related to the waste and resource efficiency side. So this is the bits that relate to my services. So what are the main areas? So it effectively sets up an office for the environmental protection, and that office is effectively there to hold government accountable, and presumably other organisations as well, such as the Environment Agency, to ensure that they're doing what they say they're doing. We'll have to see how that one pans out. The next one, I've put this in bold because there's a couple of these that we'll explore a little bit more, but effectively extended producer responsibility for the collection, processing and disposal costs. So this is for packaging material. At the moment, producers do have targets for recycling of packaging, but they don't have to necessarily pay for the cost of it. The cost of it is borne basically out of taxpayers, all of us, and the council services that we provide. That's going to change. Deposit return schemes. So this is a return to more old-fashioned days of, I just about remember Corona Pop and things like that, where effectively you have a deposit on a bottle or a can, and effectively you can take that back to the shop and get your deposit back. It's all good in theory, but I have some issues with it. I think the danger of it is that whilst it might be good in reducing litter, so for what we call on-the-go materials or packaging, it's not necessarily good for curbside collection schemes, because effectively it is duplicating what is already and very efficient across the UK collection system, and forcing it back on you, mainly retailers and supermarkets, to take these packaging materials back. And I think the problem is that it may take some of the value out of the materials that we collect. So that's a risk, but we'll see. As I say, I'm just sort of highlighting those. But where I do think it will work is in reducing litter. Then there's charges for single-use plastic. So producers that effectively continue to sell goods in or products that are made of single-use or single-use plastics will have to pay effectively a tax for doing that. And again, it's to force them to look at other materials or to look at recycled content. And then the next one, which is in bold, is the separation of waste, or what we call technically consistency in collections. As I say, I'll come on to that in a bit more detail. And effectively, this is what we're trying to do. So this is a something I use quite a lot. It's what we call the economic loop. It's the supply chain. So effectively, we need to see ourselves as part of a supply chain. We're not just on our own as a collection authority. We have to see ourselves as an important part of this process. So effectively, the way it traditionally works is that we have raw materials in, we design, we manufacture, that then goes to retail, it then gets sold, it goes to the consumer, and we as consumers finish with it, and at that point we throw it away. And this is where we as local authorities have a key strategic role in this loop, because we have the ability to decide whether that material can go forward for reuse or remanufacture or recycling, or whether it just goes for disposal. And obviously what you don't really want to do is for it to go for disposal. So this is where the government are coming from for these changes in legislation. It's very much trying to enforce for the first time a proper circular economy. And as I say, we as a local authority have to pay a key role in that, the same as design manufacturers, retailers, and other people. So in terms of extended producer responsibility, then what's it going to do? So effectively, it outlines the requirement for producers to cover the full net cost of their products after they have been used. So if we go back to the wheel, after we as consumers have finished with it, they now have to pay for what happens to that packaging once we've used it. So for us as local authorities, these costs will include collecting and transporting products or materials from households, so that's our curbside collections, for recycling or disposal. So at the moment, apart from paper, it will be everything that's in the dry recycling mix, because paper obviously isn't a packaging product, or isn't considered a packaging product. So it is card, it is plastics, it is metal cans. It also covers the element of packaging that is still in the residual waste. And again, the idea is to try and get that material out of the residual waste and into the recycling stream. They will also have to pay for the sorting and treating of products and materials for recycling and again, disposal. And again, they will have to pay for packaging litter placed in litter bins, and again, for that collection and disposal. The original intention was that they were going to have to pay for litter swept off the streets as well, but I think government got an awful lot of backlash from producers over that, and they've backed down somewhat, and it will now just be packaging out of litter bins. And lastly, they will need to pay for providing public information, so communications that we do about recycling and disposal of products and materials. So this is going to cost producers for the first time a huge amount of money, and you're looking at £2.5 billion a year probably that they're going to have to fund in terms of extended producer responsibility. So clearly, anybody that is paying, or if you're a producer and you're paying into this system, you want the system to work and you want it to be as efficient and as environmentally friendly as possible. So that's going to put pressure on us as local authorities to make sure that actually we do deliver on those commitments, because they're going to be paying for it. This is where it then links into consistency of collections. So we're all aware at the moment that certainly in England, and this only applies to English authorities because the devolved governments have had consistency in collections for a number of years. Sorry, Mr. Chief Executive, but even Northern Ireland has been ahead of England on that side. And effectively, this is where you get consistency in terms of materials collected. And if you look at the Welsh and Scottish models in particular, the way it's collected as well. And what you see in England at the moment is that we do things slightly differently to Stoke, slightly differently to Cheshire East, slightly different to well, not actually Shropshire now, because we're the same as them and we're the same as Stafford. So it's trying to get everybody working in the same way. And the idea of that is it reduces confusion with residents and consumers. It will also mandate that food waste has to be collected separately every week. So every local authority in England is going to have to do that. We're already doing it, so that's good. We're going to have to collect 4 waste streams separately from household waste: glass, metals, plastics and fibre. So the paper and card, again, we're already doing that. But in the addition, we will have to introduce Tetra Paks from 2024 and plastic film from 2026. So those are the 2 items that we don't currently collect. In fact, not many authorities do collect them. And that's because there is no reliable end markets at the moment. And then this is going to be quite a big one. So there's going to be a requirement for businesses to separate waste the same as households. So this will be your pubs, your news agents, your grocers. At the moment, they can quite legally throw everything in one bin, and that's fine. They won't be able to do that. We don't know what date this is coming in yet. Likely to be 2026 or 27. Because it's quite a complex area. But if I go back to one of my previous slides where we said it's an area we as an authority want to move into, this is the reason. We're going to have to do it anyway. We see it as a huge opportunity, and to be honest, I'd quite like to be ahead of the ball on it. What we are waiting for is still awaiting full details from government in terms of how this is all going to mesh together. The consultations took place last year, and rather frustratingly, we're still waiting. And I guess probably because we haven't really got a government as such at the moment. But it's starting to cause problems. I think producers are getting frustrated in terms of the fact they don't know how much really they're going to have to pay into the system. Local authorities are getting frustrated because we don't know what services we're really going to have to operate. And the reprocessors and remanufacturers are getting frustrated because they don't know how much investment they need to put in order to achieve the ambition of government's resource and waste strategy. So it's long overdue. Hopefully in the autumn we will see some movement. But just to really, I suppose, start to end on, we're in a good place. The current collection service that we've got already covers most of the requirements that we see coming forward. And the design of it is flexible enough to add those additional materials when they come in. And that's it. I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. That was a very detailed presentation. Thank you. So I'll look for members who've got any queries. So Councillor Fox-Hewitt first.
Thanks, Chair. Couple of questions. Before that, I'll echo the fantastic work that's been done there to get up to such high figures of efficiency, particularly the managers and the operatives that are out there doing that. Very impressive. Please pass on our thanks for that, and I would encourage the council to look at reward and recognition for such increases in efficiency. The first question is, do we have any information on if that's translated into any budgetary savings, and particularly not having to go out as frequently to do missed collections? Have we had an economic impact on the council for that? And the second one is, I know the report talks later about green fuels. I was under the impression that we're moving towards electric vehicles. Is there any update on how that transition is taking shape in terms of vehicles, maintenance costs, reduced carbon emissions? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Really good questions. Yeah, in terms of the budgets, effectively, when we designed the new service, we effectively built the budgets up. So we started from scratch again and built the budgets from there. The way the service is designed is far more easy to predict what the costs are, and indeed certainly last year we made a slight saving on budget, and this year we're at this point in time we are under budget, so it's definitely working. We're blessed at the moment, to be fair, with high material prices, so what we're able to sell our materials for, we're getting some really good income, and that's been a major help to us. So card and paper, for instance, we're getting about £130 a tonne for. Now, if I take that back 3 or 4 years, we were having to pay to get rid of that material. So that's been not a change necessarily that's a result of what we've done. It's a result in terms of changing markets and things like that. But the key is that if you can get the material sold and reprocessed in the UK, it's worth more money, and to do that it's got to be of high quality, and that's thankfully what we're achieving, and again the thanks has to go to residents that are clearly embracing that. Your second question, which is really interesting, about fuel. There is a move towards electric vehicles, but and there's a few authorities now running electric RCVs, so refuse collection vehicles, but the cost of them still is probably just over double. You're looking at for a standard diesel powered vehicle, one that we operate is about £175,000. An electric version is just under 400,000. So there's a huge cost problem. I'm not convinced that it's the way forward, to be perfectly honest. And I think what we want to do, we're talking with Keele University at the moment. They've got a hydrogen production plant that they've piloted up there. It's really to see whether we can work with them to get a fueling station. There is one operational hydrogen powered refuse collection vehicle in England at the moment, just one. But that's the technology that I think we're going to be going forward with. What we're going to do in the interim is, and there's a report going to Cabinet next week, is we're going to swap over to hydro-treated vegetable oil fuel instead of diesel. And that will certainly drop our carbon emissions dramatically by about 90% in terms of those vehicles. So that's significant, but it is more expensive than diesel. So that's the negative side. And I still see it only as a sticking plaster, really. It's only an interim measure until other technologies come along. And for me personally, I feel hydrogen is the longer term answer. So I hope that helps.
Satisfied, Councillor Fox-Ewers? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Gordon?
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just begin as a sort of ward councillor by expressing my appreciation to the bin collection teams who've worked during this summer in horrendous temperatures. I'm not aware of any miscollections in Wolstanton, and I certainly don't know any as a local resident. And all credit to them, because it's been a long, hard summer. There were a couple of issues in the report that went round, and you sort of referred to them in your presentation that I would like to sort of press you on. Firstly is the food waste collection. In the report, I think the figure of 2% increase was referred to on previous arrangements. Now, you must be disappointed in that, bearing in mind that the authority has invested in vehicles. And you said, well, we're looking at some ideas. I wondered whether you could actually share with the committee this evening some of your thoughts how that could be improved. Same with flats, and I know that is a long-standing challenge, but clearly it is something that needs to be addressed. And my final point, Chair, really is what came across to me in the paperwork was that legislation has changed, and what we're looking at is a huge shake-up of the waste management industry. And what I was wondering, given the importance of that service to the authority, whether as a committee we ought to be recommending to Cabinet that there is some sort of briefing to members. I know some aspects of the legislation, are still to be determined, and the paper does refer to some of the financial aspects which still do need to be resolved. But I really wonder whether we could actually say to Cabinet at some stage, leaving it to the good sense of officers in terms of timing and material, that some of the facts that we've seen this evening should be made available to all members, because I think that elected councillors do need to know what is happening in the waste management industry. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you for that. Yeah, your point about food waste is really interesting, actually. 2% on food waste is actually significant. But I'm going to turn it on its head slightly, because actually what happens is, and I don't know if you use the service yourself, but the evidence is that once you start separating food waste from your residual waste, you suddenly start to see how much you're wasting. And your natural behaviour is to start to reduce that. And that's exactly what you want to do. So in a sense, this is going to sound quite perverse, but actually, if you introduce a food waste service, the whole idea is actually you want it to go down. So the key for me is participation. Really, we want to know, we want to engage as many people as possible, because then hopefully they will start to amend their habits and reduce the amount of food that they throw away. And it is quite frightening, the amount of food that is thrown away. Nationally, they reckon it's over, it's over a third of what we actually buy from supermarkets and other shops, and that's quite frightening. And I think that's without, Chair, I know you're in the industry, that is without the manufacturing side of things, and I know big improvements have been made on that side, but it is absolutely frightening, and that's got to change, really. What food waste is, though, going forward is a good where you can't avoid waste, is that actually through anaerobic digestion it can be turned into really low carbon energy. So it's got its benefits, but from a householder's point of view, we want them to actually reduce the amount of food waste that they are throwing away effectively. So its participation is really the one we want to look at. In terms of flats, you're absolutely right. Really, my idea is that they should be entitled to receive the same level of service that anybody in a normal house receives, and that's where we want to try and get to. But there's many more hurdles to overcome, and we have to do communications and the like slightly differently, and it really does require quite a bit of infrastructure to be built in terms of bin stores. We've got in terms of Aspire housing, they've got an awful lot of quite old flat complexes and things. Again, we're never designed to have these types of services put in them. So it's slow, really, because it needs financial investment to be put in. But again, hopefully, this is where the extended producer responsibility starts to come in, because in theory, there should be more funding coming through the system in order to do that. Because the targets for recycling won't sit with us as a local authority, they will sit with the producers. So it's in their interest to make sure that they reach the target. And yes, I'm more than happy to. The Environment Act is a huge piece of legislation, as I say. It doesn't just affect my service, it affects other services that the council operates as well. So yes, I would certainly be quite happy that we do some form of presentation or something, or training session or something to members.
So just on that final point, I just need to see committee are happy with that as a recommendation to to Cabinet. I mean, I'd certainly second it. It's a good communication exercise to members. Are we all satisfied? Okay, so we could resolve to recommend to Cabinet that at the appropriate time, as per Mr. Bird's discretion, that members are disseminated the information. Thank you. Councillor Gorton, the previous points, are you content with the answers? Okay, thank you. Councillor Moffat then, please.
Thanks, Chair. And just to reiterate what the council has said, it's a really great report, something that Newcastle should be dead proud of. Because you've brought this Environment Act up, the 2021 one, it may be part of the training that we might receive, but also it had the ambition of that act was also to have an impact on fly tipping. I don't know whether or not there's anything you can say tonight about it. I know it's a huge issue that really causes distress to communities, but obviously there are some opportunities within that act as well, which should have a good impact.
Thank you. Yes, I mean there are. There's as I say, I think it's a really good piece of legislation. As I say, the best in 30 odd years. So and yes, it will allow us to do more, and obviously through the One Council project, we are obviously looking at moving forward in terms of what we call multifunctional services, in terms of how things are collected and dealt with, in particular from an enforcement side as well. I now have streetscene as part of my service as well, so that is moving forward, and obviously when we've got a little bit more meat on the bones in terms of how that will work, and again we need to fully understand in terms of the terms of the act how we're gonna deliver on that. We will obviously come forward with updates and reports along those lines, but yes, there's some good opportunities there for sure.
Councillor Moffat. Thank you. Any other members wishing to speak? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. Three things to say. I suppose the first is thanks very much to the portfolio holder. This is an excellent report, and it reflects the excellence of the service that's been developed and delivered under Councillor Johnson. I should declare my interest. I was on Cabinet when this when the new system was being devised, but it is certainly light years ahead of what this authority and our residents had to deal with prior. I think failure was baked into that system, and it wasn't short-lived enough, the one that we inherited. So it is an excellent report. It is an excellent recycling system. I know that the portfolio holder is held personally accountable by the leader for the 46 out of every 100,000 missed collections, and will continue. That will continue to be the case. So it's genuinely, it reflects very well on the administration. It reflects very well on our staff and our officers who've put it together and who deliver that service. I think it's been great to see some of our newly elected councillors getting involved. I'm looking now at Councillor Hutchinson. I know he's been out with the wagons, seeing how the service works. The second thing, just to come back on something that Andrew said about participation in food waste collection. Now, I'm aware that the computer technology available to us now is phenomenal. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable about Bartek or our officers recording information about whether or not I participate in the food waste scheme. But can you tell us whether or not that sort of information is being collected? Because of course, if we use the headline volume figure, it is sometimes the case that it can mislead us as to the true nature of what is going on. But on the other hand, I'm not sure that collecting that data is necessarily a phenomenal thing either. I, for example, don't participate in the food waste collection service. There are a few reasons for that. I live like a sailor on dry biscuits and strong spirits, but I do also, I compost, and therefore my material that's compostable will never appear in the waste and recycling chain. And the third thing I wanted to say or to reflect on is the extended producer responsibility requirements that are being introduced under the Environment Act. Now, they are going to bring with them some money, and I know that it is tied to the final phasing out of recycling credits, but the purpose of that part of the legislation is also to exercise a downward pressure on the production of packaging in the first place. It is a strong incentive for commercial providers or people who are selling things to minimize and simplify their packaging in such a way that there is less of it that arrives in the chain and less of it to deal with at our end. And has the authority of our officers made any sort of assessment at this early stage of what impact that might have, and whether or not the credits that might come to us through the EPR are necessarily going to be enough for us to continue delivering the same service that we do now in the same way that we do now? I do say that I'm very gratified to learn that, as far as we know at the moment, before the statutory guidance has been published, the service that this authority is providing now will be compliant. We won't have to do new things solely in order to comply with the new legislation, and the way in which we're doing things, which, as I've said, I think is very good. That will continue to be compliant, and that is good news. I think it's good for our residents as well. They'll have the continuity of knowing we're not going to have to throw out a system and implement a new one at the whim of Whitehall. Thank you, Chair. I've said quite enough.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Holland. Yes, in terms of participation, I mean, we do collect a lot of data, but we won't be coming knocking on your door asking why. Effectively, the analysis we do on participation is very straightforward. It is simply a drive down a street and effectively a marker or a bit more than a guesstimate, to be honest, but effectively how many houses. So let's say there's 20 houses in the street, there's 10 that have put food waste out, therefore it's 50% participation. It's as simple as that. The idea then is that we look at the areas where we've got low participation and then try to understand why that is the case. And then what we need to do is look at particular communication methods in terms of how we actually get to those people and understand why, and hopefully get them to then take part. I think your point about composting actually is really valid as well, and that probably needs to be still part of our communications campaign, because there are alternatives, and actually, you know, if you're able and you want to do that at home, absolutely fantastic. That's probably still the best way, in all honesty. Your bits on extended producer responsibility, absolutely. The idea of it is that we start to look at these as not, we need to stop talking about waste. These are resources. And, you know, yes, it should. The principal idea is that it changes design effectively. You know, my pet hate is Pringles boxes. You know, they are impossible to recycle, because they're made up of 3 different materials. I don't like Tetra Packs either. I personally feel that they should have been mandated out, because again, there is one plant in Halifax that is supposedly recycling them, but actually when you go and look at it, it's making very, very low quality, low volume materials out of it, and you have to wonder about the cost and everything else in that, but it certainly will drive that, and I think producers are understandably concerned, but nonetheless doing the right thing. So I've got to declare a bit of an interest. I sit on DEFRA's advisory committee on packaging, so I represent local authorities for England, but that committee is made up of the whole supply chain. So we've got the likes of Unilever on there, Nestle, Tesco's, all of the supply chain. And what I've seen and really opened my eyes is that actually those producers do want to change. And that's quite heartening, actually. And I think, again, they want to be hopefully ahead of the game on it. And it's just frustrating that we're still just waiting for the outcomes of the consultation. But as I say, hopefully they'll arrive fairly soon. So I think the prospect is good. In terms of payments, we're still waiting for the eventual models, but the idea is that effectively they're going to set a number of ruralities in the first few years, and then as things move forward and they understand about individual costs, we will we will start to get those back. What we're going to have to prove, which I think is where you're coming from, is that actually everything we're doing is as efficient as possible. So they will not stand for sloppy, inefficient, rubbish services, or services that just aren't collecting the material that they should be. And there's a national body that's being formed at the moment that will oversee that, and they will hold us as local authorities to account on the producer's behalf, effectively. So it is going to be a game changer, as you say. Recycling credits, as you quite rightly say, likely to be phased out completely. And to be honest, I don't think that's a bad thing. They're quite a blunt instrument that worked 10, 20 years ago, but aren't applicable in today's market. Hope that helps.
Thank you. You satisfied, Councillor Holland? Thank you. Councillor Panther?
It's a quick one. I know Councillor Gorton's largely covered this when he comes back. But it says here, refreshing, enhancing collection from flats. Does that mean, I presume that means cleaning? Because I was wondering, because householders don't get that service. I was just wondering, that was all.
No, sorry, it doesn't mean cleaning. It means effectively providing them with the same service as households.
Any other members wish to speak? Councillor Hutchinson?
Just regarding the 99.95% success rate, that probably equates to something like 272 collections a month that are missed. As a new councillor since the 5th of May, I've had 2 phone calls regarding missed collections. One turned out to be a garden bin that was full of bricks and rubble, and the other was a blocked street by a badly parked car. So they weren't really the fault of the council. Is there any kind of typical reasons for missed collections that maybe us councillors should be aware of, and we can maybe advise people?
There isn't really. I mean, access issues are a problem in certain streets, but as you just pointed out, actually those are not what we would class as a proper miscollection, nor somebody filling their garden waste bin full of bricks, in all honesty. But one of the main ones that probably happens, and again, it's something we're looking at, is probably on food waste. If the caddy is placed behind the bin, sometimes it's not seen, particularly on dark mornings. So that's where those sort of things can get missed. Other things will be where we do have to use agency workers occasionally, and they will because they're not used to necessarily those rounds, and you'll miss the odd one there, or they'll think, oh, my colleague's done it, and they haven't. And then we do unfortunately get people who say they've had a miscollection and haven't. And again, the drivers have got a driver team leader's got the ability to mark a property that's not presented, and if he's done that, then we'll back him all the way. But if they haven't, then they're told to go back. So there's the incentive there. Whether you will ever eradicate it altogether is difficult to say, but the idea is that with a wheel bin system, you should really have very few, or hopefully none. But I'll have a think in terms of what ward members can do, but it's a difficult one, in all honesty.
Jen, you'd like to come back, Councillor Hutchinson? Yeah.
Sorry, just one more question, if that's okay. Regarding the garden bins, since we introduced the charge for the bin, has the quality of what you're actually being collected gone up? And has the quantity maybe decreased? And how has it worked out?
That's a really good question, actually. And in terms of the first one, yes, the quality has gone up immensely. Which is really good. So I think when we had the free system, we were getting part rejected loads at the composting site. We haven't had one since the chargeable service came in. Effectively, I think there was the danger when it was a free service that you could hide other things under your grass cuttings and things like that. And that's what was happening. And again, it's not unique to Newcastle. It happens everywhere. But the quality of the material is very good. And actually, in terms of the quantities, it's always difficult seasonally because of weather. And actually this year, because it's been so dry, tonnage wasn't as high as it was last year. But actually, it's probably within 80–90% of what it was when it was a free service. So I think what you've got is the people who are paying for the service with the people who are using the service anyway, if that makes sense.
Any other members wishing to speak? No, so I'll just wrap up. So I think, just as a number of members have said this evening, and my experience in my own ward has been that actually residents are really happy with this service. It provides them with the service they desired and expected. And actually, the only request I get as a ward member is residents wanting to pop round for an extra blue bag. And that's because they're recycling more, which is great. And we do hold the blue bags for residents to come and collect extra ones. So that's always an idea if councillors want to do that. It makes it a bit easier for them and encourages them more. But on the back of everything that I've heard, I would like to propose that this committee acknowledges a sincere thanks to both the officers and all of the workers in this service that provide this borough with a fantastic service. And if we could minute that, please. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll certainly pass that on. It's very kind.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the next agenda item now, which is the second and last of the substantive items, and that's agenda item 6, which is the Future High Street Fund and Town Deal, a regular item on our agenda, and this will be introduced by Cabinet Member Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Chair. As this scrutiny committee will be aware, this is a regular update on the Future High Street Fund and Town Deal projects. Last month, our officer provided a detailed summary of progress for the new scrutiny panel. And this month, our Chief Exec, Martin Hamilton, will provide an update on progress made over the summer. Thanks, Martin.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Councillor Johnson. What I'm going to do, I'm standing in for Simon McKennedy this evening, so I'm using his slides, and there are a few things in life quite as enjoyable as giving somebody else's presentation, and but I will do my best for you. And as the portfolio holder said, you know, what I've got here is an update for you on where we are with the 3 strands: the Future High Streets Fund, and then the town deal for Newcastle, and also the town deal for Kidsgrove. And starting off with the Future High Street Fund, and for the Rycroft site in particular, hopefully you'll all have noticed, anytime you've been past Rycroft, the old civic offices are now completely gone. You get a good sense, if you peek through the gate, just how big a site that is. There's a lot of space in there. And a couple of months ago, we took through Cabinet the blueprint for Rycroft, which has actually got 5 distinct elements to it. So taking you through this, the first of these is creating a new multi-storey car park, which, as I'll pick up later on, facilitates the redevelopment of the Midway Car Park. Anybody that uses that will be very familiar with the fact that it's a fairly tired and unwelcoming space at the moment. So actually getting a new modern car park will be important for the town. The next proposal as we go across the site is for a hotel, 100-bed hotel. There's interest in the market for a mid-range, mid-market hotel for that site, and we're working on the feasibility for that at the moment. There's then the residential element. So we're looking at somewhere in the region of 90 units for the over 55s market. and then linked to that a new headquarters for Aspire. Now, all of those elements are, if you like, conspire to put more people into the town centre, and therefore we've got more footfall using and supporting the businesses in the town centre. Now, I mentioned that there is 5 elements to this, and one of the bits that I don't want to overlook is this. Can you see where my cursor is there? This open space. So there's going to be, within the blueprint, significant piece of public open space through this development, which allows us to link into the part of town over at sort of West Brampton through to the town centre. To give you some sense of scale, that public open space is roughly the same width as the Iron Market, which, you know, as you'll be aware, is a fairly substantial thoroughfare. So we are currently working up the design, etc., for the car park. We aim to be coming through to for planning consent for that in the near future. Let's say we're working on the feasibility for the hotel, and we expect to see applications coming through for the residential and the office development again later in this financial year. So it's quite a big program planned for that site. One of the other things I just mentioned in terms of the demolition, and it's really Andrew's presentation that has prompted me to mention this. There was somewhere in the high 90% of product that came off that site, apart from the asbestos, that was actually recycled. So if you could imagine, the old civic office was a steel frame with substantial sort of concrete structure. So steel frame was recycled. The concrete structure was, again, if you were in town when it was happening, you would have seen and heard it, was ground up to be used in construction. All of the timber off the site will have gone for recycling. A lot of that will have gone either to be made into chipboard or made into pallets, etc. So what came off the site there was actually a very small portion of it that wasn't actively recycled. So I can look Andrew in the eye and not feel guilty about that contribution. Linked to that, you'll be aware that we've bought, as part of the Future High Streets Fund, we bought the York Place Astley Walk complex, and are working with Wilmot Dixon at the moment to support the development of that. Now, that particular element of the Future High Street is actually really important in providing a good quality linkage between Iron Market and the High Street, and was actually quite an attractive part of town around where Nero's is, and the old bank, and the Bull's Head is the pub there, I think. Linking that through to the Carlton Club and to the Rycroft development, so that, you know, I mentioned with the Rycroft development, a lot of the thinking there is about getting people into that space that are going to support the town centre. So actually making that an attractive thoroughfare across. So what we have in mind there is somewhere in the region of 6,000 square metre development, which includes 1,700 square metre of ground floor retail and leisure and restaurant space, and then office accommodation above. So obviously all of those proposals in due course will need to go through the planning process, but that together with the Rycroft development will fundamentally improve that top end of town. In terms of Kidsgrove, I must admit, when I'm doing any of these presentations or preparing reports, it always does delight me the fact that we've got 2 town deals, one for Kidsgrove and one for Newcastle, and best part of 17 million available for Kidsgrove. There's 5 projects there in total. Now, the town deal process, Simon Mack may have taken you through the process for this before, but we, first of all, get allocated the funding. We then need to work up business cases for each individual element, which are then submitted to government for approval. So the 5 projects there have all been approved. Kidsgrove Sports Centre was the first of the full town deal projects in Kidsgrove. In fact, first of both of the town deals to be completed. So if you do fancy an opportunity to see what can be done with town deal, go and have a wander around the new refurbed and reopened Kidsgrove Sports Centre. It's looking very grand indeed. Chatterley Valley, the work has started on site there. The town deal element of this is significantly de-risking the site by funding access works to enable the development of that particular site, and the agreements for that have been signed and work is now underway. The railway station, that's a joint project with the County Council, Network Rail and East Midlands Railway to make improvements to the railway station. So that's been approved by government, and the funding agreement is just being finalised for that between ourselves and those partners. And then again, we're at the same state really with the canal enhancements, where we're just finalising that funding agreement. And the shared service hub, which will be significant development in the centre of Kidsgrove, the business case now been approved, and there's quite a significant bit of design work to undertake with that, so that we can make sure that we design a service hub that has got both the right visible impact, but also has got the right services co-located there, and we have the necessary program to move that forward. So Kidsgrove is really motoring into very much into the delivery phase, as well as the sports centre being sort of a very visible sign of what can happen. Of course, under the advanced town deal in Kidsgrove, there was also the delivery of the pump track and the 3G pitches at the school. So there's quite Kidsgrove has got off to a flying start as far as town deal is concerned. For the Newcastle town deal, 23.6 million. There's 9 projects in total. Now, 8 of these have had the business cases submitted to government and approved. There's one which we're submitting later. So that's the Centre for Performing Arts. We've got an extension to work up the business case for that. But as we run through those, Nutton Master Plan works is really in the design phase now being progressed, and the programme of works being developed. Crossheath and Chesterton, likewise, just getting that through to the next phase of development, because that's at the back end of, if you like, of a wider development. The walking and cycling routes scheme, the go-ahead's now been given to the County Council to get on. They're delivering that programme across the borough, so they can now push ahead. We have an element of this programme which we refer to as the gateway sites, and essentially there's 2 parts to that. Zanzibar's, which was demolished, I think, using the advanced town deal, with support from the advanced town deal funding, and the design has now been agreed, and we'll be going through the planning process for that. And that includes both residential and also some small enterprise units there. So we will see that coming through to planning committee in due course. And then the Midway Car Park that I mentioned earlier, that's on a slightly slower track, because we really need to make sure that we've got the multi-storey car park approved and underway before we start to look at the demolition, etc., and redevelopment of the Midway. The Centre for Performing Arts, say that business case is yet to be submitted. We'll be submitting that later on this year. Digital Society is a project that's led by Keele University and is about bringing together residents and businesses to enhance their digital skills and sort of transfer skills between people. And for that, I say, business plans been approved, premises have been secured for that in the town centre, and we're just going through that process of sorting out the grant agreement. You'll hear me say that throughout this about the grant agreements. The process involves us getting the funding agreed by government. We then, as the accountable body, enter into an agreement with whatever organisation is going to be delivering the project. And the funding will come through to us from the government. We're expecting it in September, so we should get the town deal funds through quite promptly. And then we're in the initiation stage of work around charging points and sort of enhanced gigabit broadband. So we're really on both of these are moving forward now into the delivery phase. In terms of where we are with the programme, all of the accelerated town deal funding has now been spent. 40% of the Future High Streets Fund has now been spent. That is, if you like, the demolition of the civic offices and the purchase of the York Place. Less on Kids Grove, only 16% there, but a further 20% committed. And we're expecting with the town deal in Newcastle to really see that ramp up from September when when the actual the spend begins, when we get the money. We're not going to be spending anything until we have the cash in the bank. So a lot for the economic development team to get their teeth into at the moment. A lot for the two town deal boards to be engaged with. Both of the town deals are overseen by multi-agency boards that are concerned about the governance of those projects, albeit that the council is the accountable body and therefore accountable to government for the spend and the outcomes. And so a bit of a whistle-stop tour takes us through to questions. And
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
Stop sharing so that the world can watch the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. It was good to hear of the progress on such important projects across the borough. So I'll hand over to members for any questions or observations, please. Madam Mayor.
I just wanted to bring you up to date a bit more, Martin. Kids Grove Sports Centre has been open just over a month now, and it's absolutely beautiful inside if you can get along, go down. And the membership that we were encouraging to break even, we've excelled that, so that's really pleasing as well. And we've sort of had to turn some people away because it's been that popular at certain swimming sessions, unfortunately. So that's really good.
Send them to J2.
And at the railway station, the new lifts are absolutely amazing. For 28 years, when my daughter was little, I've hauled pushchairs and prams up those steps. So it's great now to have lifts that go over to all 4 platforms. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fox-Ewart.
Thanks, Chair. Just regarding the cycling routes, just after some assurances really that we've got a say in that, because quite a few residents have raised their eyebrows and concerns at where some of the routes are going, and just an assurance that those routes we've got a greater say in the long-term development of what we're doing rather than them being imposed by the county council. I'm just interested in that point. And the second one, the Rycroft, it looks and sounds really exciting. It's going to be an exciting time for the borough. Just as a member, I'd be particularly interested into seeing, particularly the travel corridor that you're working on. Just to have a number of developments proposed, really, and in particular, I'd like to see us look at some of the the modern works that have gone on in cities like Hull and Coventry, and then look at some of the historic towns and see how they blended more modern works in to sit within the character of the towns, and just to see a range of ideas so that we can all collectively agree what would be a good fit moving forward. Thank you.
Mr. Hamilton?
Yeah, in terms of the cycling and walking routes, the county council is leading on that, but as you would expect, there'll be involvement around where those go and how they're prioritized. Yeah. In terms of the development of the Rycroft and those aspects of it, I think one of the values, if you like, that we approach this from is really using the existing architecture in the town as a significant backdrop. I mean, it is when you wander around the centre of Newcastle, it is well worth looking up, because when I talk about York Place, some of the architecture around there is really quite impressive. So whatever we do needs to complement that and to really sort of enhance that the look and feel of the town centre as it is at the moment. So yeah, totally, we would not be looking to develop anything that was out of character with that.
Any follow-up questions? No, thank you. Any other member? Councillor Panther?
Thank you, Chair. It's just really a compliment. I mean, a while ago, Kidsgrove was quite neglected. And I think with what's been proposed and started on the Kidsgrove for High Street Run, nobody can have any complaints whatsoever. I think they've been well and truly catered for there.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Holland?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the young officer who's come in to substitute for Simon McKenney and make that very important presentation for us tonight.
Great to get off the bench.
Just a delight to have you in the room always. It's been phenomenal stuff. How do you critique something that seems to be going so well and so swimmingly? I could praise the government, as I have done on previous occasions, for giving us the money. I could praise our local MPs, Aaron Bell and Jonathan Gullis, for having helped us secure it, and I could praise our administration for now leading the delivery of all these projects. And delivery is very important. I know the government, or the soon-to-be previous government, has launched levelling up as a kind of buzzword, and people ask, what does it mean really? But fortunately in Newcastle and Kidsgrove, we can say exactly what it means. It is in these projects that we are now delivering things that we're doing to make life better for the people who live here and the people who we represent. I've got a question, I suppose, because it's a question that should be addressed, but I have every expectation of what the answer will be. And that question, I think, is inflation. We now have inflation after a very long time in this country of not having had meaningful inflation. And when it comes to delivering projects of this scale, whether it's the government funding it, whether it's our money, or whether it's private investment, that money is going to go less far with every period of time that passes. I know we've got deadlines to adhere to, and we seem to be adhering to them. What provision has the council made? What is the chief executive's attitude to how that's going to work? And are there any risks associated with a high inflation cycle that we're in at the moment?
Good question. Yes, there are risks. We do see inflation on costs on across a number of on all sorts of projects like this. And interestingly, when we were doing the Kidsgrove Sports Centre, we reached a critical point when we were contracting that, where we actually sort of had to take a decision that, right, okay, we're contracting now, and it locked in the price because at that time, they were anxious that they were going to start to see cost inflation coming onto the developer there. So we got well away there, but we're going through a process at the moment as we work these schemes up, that we will also be needing to say, well, okay, are we going to need we always do value engineering anyway. We may need to do more value engineering, but also we just may need to to also be looking for additional funds if that happens. But at this stage, we're at the stage of working up the proposals, working up the costs. But there's it would be naive to say that inflation isn't a risk to how these schemes progress. What I would say is if we take something like the Rycroft site, the actual mix that we have there, I would be much more content with as being, what would you say, robust in the market than the retail, the largely retail scheme that was previously going to be coming onto the site. So I think having that healthy mix there is actually really quite important. But as the costs are worked up, we sort of brace ourselves to see what impact inflation has on that, and also what the government as funders of this, what their attitude to that inflation is going to be, as to whether there is sort of any enhancement to the funds that's offered in order to offset.
Anything follow up, Councillor Holland? No. Any other member wishing to speak? Just one from myself then, Mr. Hamilton, and that is that I do quite regularly still get residents expressing concern about the state of Newcastle town centre. And when I tell them about all the exciting projects that we've got on the way, because I've never updated on it, they think, great, that sounds perfect. When is it happening? Why didn't we know about it? So that says to me we need to be a bit smarter with our comms. And I realise that up to now we've been in a development stage, but I think we've now got the project sufficiently developed that I'd like to see a better communication with the public and our residents, be that through social media, be that through billboards in the town centre, both electronic and visual. And I just wondered were there any plans in place for that?
I mean, now that we are in a much more certain position in terms of what gets developed, it does create the opportunity to do much more in terms of comms. Now, the likes of Rycroft lends itself to that because it's a very, if you like, a very visible thing. If we take something like the Newcastle town deal, there's some of that will almost communicate itself, because if you take the digital society, that will have a presence in the town centre. People will see that when we get to the point with the Performing Arts Centre likewise. But I absolutely take on board there is we're at a point now where there's an opportunity to have a stronger comms program around this. In terms of folk commenting on sort of, if you like, the health of the town centre. For my sins, I walk through the town centre every morning at around about 8 o'clock, and at that time you will actually see one of the in very live form, one of the innovations that the council has brought forward, which is the town ranger, who effectively prepares the town for business and to be open. So there is that initial, there's cleaning going on in the town centre at that time. We're moving away detritus that's potentially been left over by rough sleepers. The police have started to be out and about at that time in the morning as well to do an initial sweep of the town. So there's an awful lot going on in terms of actually that look and feel of what we have, as well as the preparing for this development. So I think it's always a popular thing to say, oh, the town centre is in a bad state. Actually, if you walk around the town centre, you will see it's pretty good in terms of litter. We have active strategies in place in terms of the rough sitters that we have, in terms of rough sleepers, etc., etc. There's a lot of work going on to actually very consciously manage the town centre as, for want of a better expression, an event space, because every day is an event in the town centre.
Thank you. And I think it's good to hear that that is happening. And maybe I should have been a bit clearer when I spoke about what the residents' feedback was. It wasn't so much about detritus, etc. It was more about the physical condition. So the amount of shops that are empty, the amount of charity shops that there are. And that is all going to change with these exciting proposals. And it's more about getting that level of communication out there very visually so that people can see it as they're walking around the town centre, more so, not having to come into here to look at things in the library, but actually see it out there.
I think the other thing I should mention is anybody that's around the town now is also likely to see people on the Sky building, because there's works now starting to happen there, which is encouraging to see.
It is indeed. Thank you. Okay, so we will move to that's the conclusion of that item on the agenda. I take it everybody's happy to accept that and there's no further questions. No. Thank you. So we'll now move on to agenda item 7, which is the work programme. Every meeting I do ask members to put forward their thoughts on the work programme, and I've got to say every meeting I don't get any. And I'm now running out of personal ideas now to put on the agenda. So it is really important that I get some, and I can see Councillor Panther is chomping at the bit.
Chair, I should have written this down, the exact name of it down, but I haven't. Where the Turkish barbers are, there's something there about, I think the council have been involved with is it safe space or something where they're encouraging people to safety, especially women, to get home at night. Taxis. I'm just wondering, anything like that, anything similar, can we have a feedback? Because I'm sure that would greatly reassure people, ladies and gentlemen for that matter, coming into town late at night, they would feel safe. I'd just love to know how it's going.
I'm not sure, does that fall within our remit as a scrutiny committee?
I suspect that's probably more a health and well-being.
Yeah.
But perhaps linked to that, I mean, it might be useful for us to brief on the committee on all of the activities that we have, the programme for, if you like, the strategic management of the town centre, which would touch on things like that.
Good. Okay, that would be a good agenda item. Thank you. So yes, if members would just really consider that and get any topics through to me. Do you want to speak, Councillor Fox-Ewers?
Yes, please, Chair. It's just maybe an idea to put on there going forward is really on the point that you've just made around empty shops, particularly the Roebuck and the High Street. Could we not look at going forward producing some media to promote the local economy? So when we've got some of the final designs in the final phase for the Rycroft project, do some videos to show the investment that's coming in, how exciting time it is to be a business attracting to Newcastle, and to try and get some more of those bigger name retailers to consider coming to Newcastle. Maybe that should be a project that we should be looking for economy, and maybe a town deal public relations officer. Maybe Mr. Holland might like Mr. Hutton as a post holder for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, we will now move on to item 8, which is public question time. I've not been made aware of any questions submitted in the time from the public, and therefore we move on to item 9, and likewise I've not been made aware of any urgent business. So that now concludes this evening's meetings, and we will close it at 8:29. I'd like to thank members and officers for their time this evening and wish you all a safe journey home. Thank you.